for the reading of Matthew.
Glory is to hear.
Jesus said to his disciples, "You must not allow yourselves to be called Rabbi, since you have only one master, and you are all brothers. You must call no one on earth your father, since you have only one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor must you allow yourselves to be called teachers, for you have only one teacher, the Christ. The greatest among you must be your servant. Anyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and anyone who humbles himself will be exalted." Så skrev han til dem.
Magnus and grace.
Our sins. Well, St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the great saints of the Middle Ages, the 13th century. We see a huge flowering of both the Dominican and the Franciscan and, well, also the Augustinians, a number of religious orders really coming to the fore in those centuries. And there's many great ruins in Ireland of the monasteries and the little communities that they had established here, even back in those times. And so St. Thomas Aquinas is one of those great figures. It was the time of the beginning, I suppose, of many of the universities as well. And great learning and education was beginning to flourish and grow at the hands of great religious orders. We were talking about this yesterday, actually, on the Catechesis with Sister Mara Rose. She'll be starting a new breakfast show tomorrow morning, please God, a Dominican who's come from the US and, as it were, returning some of the favour, so to speak, to Ireland. It's nice to see these communities, Franciscans and Dominicans, flourishing in Ireland today. So it is that we can see how the Lord has blessed the Church, and certainly blessed Ireland over the centuries with a huge wave of teaching religious who have done tremendous good, an incalculable debt. It just simply cannot be measured. And so for all the negativity and all the attitude that tends to pitch itself against the Church in the whole realm of education and of healthcare, the work that has been done by priests and religious down through the centuries has been absolutely enormous in the area of education. And so education and wisdom is probably the better way to look upon it, because it's not so much about academic achievement. Certainly Thomas Aquinas ranks way up there as one of the high mountain peaks of academic prowess, and his capacity for this dialectical method, the scholastic method of raising an issue, a doctrinal issue, pitching and laying out all of the different arguments against the proposition, say in relation to divine grace, pitching in all the arguments to say why this is wrong, or this is, what could be said against it, and then resolving it with his dissertation, if you like, his expansion, and demolishing all the arguments that he proposed. So he's very good at setting up counter arguments, which is good. It's a good helps to understand and deepen our knowledge, and again just broaden our sense of where the doctrines of the Church are coming from. So that scholastic method is a classic approach to theology and philosophy too. So it's timely that we have begun a lovely new program on Thursdays at 2 p.m. You'll find it as a podcast certainly, and as a repeat show too, Faith and Reason with Dr. Gavin Kerr and Niamh as well. Just a great opportunity to take a stroll into that whole area of wisdom and philosophy and the love of wisdom, the great thinkers of our day, and help us then to begin to look around, as it were, that world of where does wisdom lead us, and ultimately, of course, to truth, and truth in the person of Christ. And this is why in prayer wisdom is given to the writer of the Book of Wisdom. It's not so much in the acquisition of the knowledge of all the great thinkers. It's very important and has a hugely important place in the formation of our theology. And certainly when priests, it comes to their formation, philosophy is essential. It's a kind of a building block for that. But in prayer and in grace and in the sacraments, we find that the wisdom that God gives is far greater. And again, it doesn't demand degrees and qualifications. Very often the simplest and the humblest of all are the ones who have the deepest wisdom. These are the ones living in the unitive way, so close to the Lord, the poor and the humble and the lowly, which confounds, of course, the rich and the famous and the clever and the educated. And this is what the Lord is driving at in the gospel for us today. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. And St. Thomas, I mentioned at the beginning of Mass, reached that point in his own spiritual journey. It was interesting to hear Dr. Kerr mentioning what the struggle that Aquinas had in the work that went into the intellectual work of formulating all his great works. But that by the end he put his pen down, and obviously the Lord had revealed to him some insight into his wisdom, heavenly wisdom, and he said, all I have written is just mere straw. And so it really puts it all into perspective for us. That yes, the academic pursuit is good and worthwhile, but in the light of God's wisdom, words fail us. I'm sure we'll arrive to heaven with God's help and begin to see God face to face, and we'll run out of words. There'll be nothing left to say. Our jaws will be the first few centuries of eternity trying to lift our jaw back up again in the sight and the wonder of God's beauty. So let us love wisdom indeed, philosophy. That's the pursuit of the love of wisdom. And as the writer says, love her more than health or beauty. Prefer her to the light, and prefer her to all earthly riches, that God would fill us with himself and direct us in his ways only.